Hey, if you want the latest and top stories, go to SaraACarter.com. That's SaraACarter.com. You can also check out the podcast page and download the Sara Carter Show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You know, today we're going to take a closer look at Ukraine. I have a wonderful guest today that I know you all will appreciate. He is Pastor Andrew Moroz. He is a pastor in Virginia. He was born in Russia, and his family went to Ukraine and then came to the United States. He still has family there in Ukraine as well as Russia. Think about that. And some of the family members that he has in Ukraine are trying to escape. Some of them are already on the road, on their way out of Ukraine. Some of them are there fighting the fight. I'm also going to be talking about Congress and why they want to spend more money on the Border Patrol and ICE. Because, my gosh, we have a border that is so wide open and such a huge national security risk. You know, we talk about Ukraine, and Ukraine is very important. I am not taking anything away from what is happening to the Ukrainian people and the horrors that they are facing from Russian President Vladimir Putin. But right here at our border, we are faced with an enemy, the drug cartels, terrorists, everything else, contraband, the humanitarian crisis. And on both sides of the border, whether you live in Mexico, whether you live in the United States, it is like a lawless land where our federal agents have to stand up and fight for not only our nation, but for their own lives. And I'll give you my insights as well as to why Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates won't take President Biden's phone calls. Interesting, isn't it? Looks like the Abraham Accords were great under President Trump, and President Biden has failed to live up to even any of the progress that we made in the last presidency. Please follow and subscribe. Get all the links at SaraACarter.com, SaraACarter.com. And while you are there, please sign up for our email list so that you don't get shadow banned. Before I get to my monologue, before I get to the main top of this podcast, I want to talk to you a little bit about AMAC. AMAC is the Association of Mature American Citizens. It welcomes everyone who cares about the future of our great republic. They want you to join. They want you to stand against the progressive agenda. And that's why they are a sponsor of the Sara Carter Show. There is strength in numbers, folks. That's why AMAC does what it does. And together, we can bring one clear, resounding voice to Washington, D.C. I want you to tell you this. By joining AMAC, you're taking the first steps to saving the America you love. AMAC offers an alternative to just about every benefit that AARP offers. But guess what? Without the liberal agenda. I stand with AMAC, and I hope that you will too. I encourage you to join today at amac.us/Carter. That's amac.us/Carter. The benefits of membership are great, but the cause is even greater. Join today at amac.us/Carter. Okay, my representative, and I'm going to bring him on this podcast one of these days, very soon, Texas Rep Chip Roy. He rips Republicans and Democrats for rushing through the Ukraine spending bill and everything else in the government funding bill. I mean, because it's a bunch of pork, folks. It's a bunch of pork, and I'm going to talk about that. And he says Republicans are getting tricked into... Republicans always get tricked. They always get tricked into supporting these crazy bills, right? Because there is more money for immigration. Listen to this.
But my colleagues on this side of the aisle are about to get played. And everybody back home is saying, what are you going to do to stop vaccine mandates? Nothing. What are you going to do to secure the border? And my colleagues on this side of the aisle are going to say, oh, don't worry, we're going to give you more money for ICE, more money for Border Patrol. But you know what that does? It makes it worse. Because you're funding the processing of people at our border. Because that's all Border Patrol and ICE are doing. But my colleagues on this side of the aisle are going to say, oh, look at us. We did something for you for border security. It ain't true. It's going to make it worse. And anybody who's been to the border, anybody who talks to Border Patrol, anybody who talks to ICE knows that's true.
Congressman Chip Roy is 100% right on the money here. And I'm going to tell you why. Because we already have at the border at the border, federal law enforcement agents, Border Patrol, Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers, everybody's ready to do the job and they're not being allowed to do it. They are not being allowed to do their job. What do I mean by this? I mean the fact that they are allowing people into our country without even good background checks, not sufficient background checks, sometimes no background checks at all. There are people literally coming in from all parts of the world. I have a lot of sources on the border. I'll be back up at the border in a couple of weeks. But there are people coming from all parts of the world. They are not bringing in any identification. And I've been talking to Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers who are telling me, guess what? We're not even, if they pass a security clearance here in the U.S., which means maybe they didn't commit a crime here in the United States, they have no idea if they committed crimes overseas. But if they just go ahead and pass that without even a COVID test, without anything else, they just let them right on into the country. It is totally catch and release. And Republicans know this. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of the Republicans know this. Chip Roy is right. They know this. They know that they are not allowing, I'm talking about the federal government, is not allowing its agents, Border Patrol agents or ICE officers or FBI or anybody else to do their job. They know that the Democrats are doing this. And they just want to make it look like they have a Band-Aid, right? So that way people are like, oh, well, he voted for that bill so we can get more money. We don't need more money. We need to follow the law. We need people to actually follow the law, which means if you're illegal, you get deported back, which means we stop the funnel, right? We send a message across not just Central America and Mexico, but across the world that our border is no longer open, that you cannot just traffic children and women and bring people into this country and bring drugs into this country like fentanyl, which is responsible, right? And opioids for the deaths of nearly 100,000 people in fiscal year 2021. And some of that comes from China. We've been talking about this. We've got, when it comes to fentanyl in particular, the Chinese are sending the precursor drugs into Mexico. The Mexican drug cartels, I'm going to say it again, are mixing it up and creating these counterfeit pills. These counterfeit pills look exactly like Percocet, Oxycontin, Adderall, everything else. And then they are being shipped into the United States and they are killing our people. We are literally allowing our people, our children, to die by not following the law. They are not following the law. So knowing how bad our border is, what do we do about it? I mean, we can't wait for something to happen in America. We can't wait for there to be another attack like September 11th. We can't allow the border to become an open sieve. So we need to take the responsibility ourselves as well by contacting our lawmakers, by exposing the truth, no matter how hard it is. I don't care. We just have to tell the truth. And I think Chip Roy is one of the few. I mean, there's other members of Congress, Congressman Andy Biggs out of Arizona, others, Jim Jordan, who have talked about this, who have focused in on the border. Even here, Brian Babin, and I mean, all of the Texas congressional members. But we as Americans have to pay attention to what's happening at the border. And by the way, we also have to be paying attention to what's happening overseas. I don't know if you all saw this, but Saudi Arabia, the leadership of Saudi Arabia, as well as the United Arab Emirates, they refused to take phone calls from guess who? President Biden. Our president. They didn't even take his phone calls. You know how embarrassing that is? I mean, that's incredible. The leader, supposedly, of the free world, President Biden, was rejected in phone calls. And I'm going to tell you why. And it was about boosting oil output from Saudi Arabia. Like, President Biden is fishing all over the world trying to find oil instead of finding oil here at home, which is very important. The only thing that is going to help us on a national security level, our nation, because we see what's happened with Russia and Ukraine. We see how Russia, we were still buying oil from Russia, guys. How crazy is that? So the money that we were sending there was supporting the war effort in Ukraine, the Russian war effort in Ukraine, not the Ukrainian allies. But now that Biden's making these phone calls trying to boost oil output, the Saudis and the UAE are saying, yeah, no way. They're snubbing him. And I'm going to tell you why I think that is. Part of it you saw under President Trump with the Abraham Accords, it was amazing. Never have we seen, in I don't even know, it was 20 something years, a situation where the United States was able to do something positive in the Middle East in such a way that Israel and the Middle Eastern nations were finally reaching a point where they were talking, where Saudi Arabia was like, you know what? We can make this happen. And by the way, a lot of that had to do with Iran. So you know why I think they're snubbing Biden? I think they're snubbing Biden because Biden's trying to cut that deal, that horrible Iran deal again, nuclear deal again, because really he's doing the bidding of President Obama and all those that worked under him. That's why they're snubbing him, because it's the Iranians that want to take over control of the Middle East. It is the Persians, the great Iranian empire, right? Except this is not like the old empire of Iran. This is run by a cult-like group of fanatics, the Ayatollahs, and Saudi Arabia sees them as a mortal enemy, more so than it would ever look at Israel as one, because it doesn't. Not to the extent as they see Iran. And you also have a significant issue right now with Yemen. And I don't think people are paying enough attention to this, but the Houthi-dominated government in Yemen literally sent missiles towards the Arabian Peninsula. The Houthi fired missiles at Abu Dhabi in January. No one's even paid attention to that. The missiles were home assembled in Yemen with the technical assistance. And by the way, with the technical assistance, this was written by Bruce Riedel. I know him very well. I used to know him much, much better when I worked at the Washington Times. But Bruce Riedel was with the CIA. And he did this. They built these missiles with the help of Iran and Hezbollah. So the reason why Biden is getting snubbed by what used to be very strong allies of the United States is because Biden is assisting the enemies of our allies. Iran is not only an enemy of Israel, it really is an enemy of Saudi Arabia. It really is an enemy of Saudi Arabia. And the nuclear deal will threaten the entire neighborhood in the Middle East and in the Persian Gulf. Can you blame them for snubbing Biden? I sure as heck can't. Also want to tell you really quickly, I don't know if you've all seen that, but the story, it was devastating in Ukraine. And I say we pray every single day for our Ukrainian brothers and sisters, because what has happened to them over there is unimaginable, especially the indiscriminate shelling of civilians by Vladimir Putin. These are war crimes. These are war crimes against the people of Ukraine. And in fact, I agree, and I'm going to bring the pastor on shortly, and he's going to talk to you himself, because I think you're going to be amazed at what he has to say. It's just an incredible, incredible story of bravery and hope. I mean, it also comes with all the tragedy that war comes with. But Pastor Andrew Moroz will be here. He's with the Gospel Community Church in Lynchburg, Virginia. He is also a Ukrainian American, and he has family that is still both in Ukraine and Russia. Some of his Ukrainian family has already fled to Poland, but some of his relatives still remain in Ukraine. And he's going to tell us straight from them what is happening on the ground right now in Ukraine. But I want us to remember what just happened this past week. And I think we've all seen those videos of Russian aircraft basically bombarding a children's hospital on Wednesday. People were being buried in rubble, despite the ceasefire deal to allow people to flee Mariupol. The Russians, especially Vladimir Putin, never keep their word. Every time he opens his mouth, he's lying. Every time. Listen to this. The attack, and this is coming from Reuters, which authorities said injured women in labor and left children in the wreckage, is the latest grim incident of the 14-day invasion. It's the biggest assault on a European state since 1945. Put that into perspective, right? Let's just put that into perspective. And that's why I have Pastor Andrew Moroz here today. He's going to tell you all about it, his phone calls with his family, what's been happening on the ground in Ukraine, and more importantly, what you and I can do to make a difference and to help our brothers and sisters who are fighting for freedom all the way in the Eastern European nation. Listen, before I go to Pastor Andrew Moroz, I want to talk to you a little bit about MyPillow. They're a great sponsor of this show and a great patriot, Mike Lindell, who believes in our nation and making things here, made in the USA. And by the way, right now he's having a lot of great deals. And who doesn't love a great deal? Guys, I mean, we can get MyPillows right now as low as $19.98. And that's if you go to mypillow.com/Carter. That's mypillow.com/Carter. MyPillows as low as $19.98. Slippers at 50% off. MyPillow towel sets at their lowest price ever, only $39.99. And guess what? 60% off any Giza Dream Sheets with a price as low as $39.99. And listen to this, you'll get a free book with the code Carter. You will find all these offers and more at mypillow.com/Carter or call 1-800-685-7221. Right now, every order using promo code Carter will receive Mike's new book, What Are the Odds? From Crack Addict to CEO, free. You'll get that for free. mypillow.com/Carter or call 1-800-685-7221. Get direct access to deals at mypillow.com/Carter. I'm so happy to have you on the show, Pastor Andrew Moroz. You're a pastor of the Gospel Community Church in Lynchburg, Virginia. I was telling everybody at the top of the show how important it is to hear the voices of the family members and those of the Ukrainian people as we watch these, I mean, I think for me, heartbreaking and horrific videos and photos that are coming to us from overseas, and wishing that we could do so much more. I want to thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Sara. This means so much to me personally, and this means so much to the people of Ukraine that we're able to have these conversations. And it's not lost on me that if the Russian Federation takes over the Ukrainian government, that reporters are not going to have opportunities like this because they're not allowed to talk about war. They're not allowed to talk about invasions unless it somehow benefits the Russian regime. And so to be able to have a conversation with you and advocate for my people means a lot to me.
Well, let me tell you, it means a lot to me too. My mother, I'm a first generation on my mother's side, Cuban American. My mother fled Cuba in the 1960s. When she did, it was because of the rise of communism and the failure of, the island to be able to fight back against Fidel Castro, who was backed by then by the Soviet regime. And you're also very familiar with this because Ukrainian American family, I mean, you've had some people that have family members that have escaped Ukraine, gone to Poland. Some of your relatives have remained in Ukraine. You are here in the United States. So I think you'd be very well aware of what it would be like and what your family has gone through, not just now, but in the past, living under communism, living under a dictatorship, right?
Oh, absolutely. Communism does not work. That's why I was born in the mid 80s in the Soviet Union. And when Ukraine became independent in 1991, my family had an opportunity to actually leave and go abroad. Ukraine was a very young democracy, a very young country, and there was not as many opportunities. And that's one of the reasons why my family left Ukraine to come to the United States. But our heart has always been in Ukraine and with Ukraine. We have spent subsequent years there. We've gone back and done trips to Ukraine. And our hearts are breaking. And partially, we are afraid of it going back to the way it used to be. We don't want to go back in time. We want to go forward. We want to see the Ukrainian democracy and the people thrive and flourish. And that's why capitalism is so important. And that's why that connection to the West is so important.
I agree with you. And I think you bring up a really, a great point. I mean, here your family, they fled. You were born in the old Soviet Union. I mean, it wasn't that long after you were born that, glasnost and perestroika came into play. And, the Soviet Union then broke up, it collapsed. And then there was this great hope that there would be a new kind of revival of democracy. But instead, we've seen the power, of the old KGB, the FSB, under Vladimir Putin. I mean, do you have hope that there could ever be a change with what you've seen? Do you think that it's through the Ukrainian people, through the Lithuanian people, through those Eastern Bloc nations that we're going to see the rise of democracy?
I think that they are leading the charge for us, but they can't do it alone. They are setting the example. They are paying with their blood. They are paying with their sweat. They are paying by allowing, they're paying a high cost. And I think they can't do it alone. We need to join them in that. And some of it has to do with advocating. Some of it has to do with further sanctions. And some of it may have to do with us being on the ground with them right now through refugee care. I have friends and ministry partners who are part of that work on the Polish border right now, and they're helping out in that way. But this is not just a fight for the Eastern European bloc. I think this is a fight for all of Europe, and in many ways, probably for democracy around the world. I want to see the world come together. They're expressing, their outrage, but we need to do more than just express our outrage.
I agree with you there. I was actually kind of stunned that the Department of Defense did not agree to send those planes that going from Poland that were supposed to end up going to Ukraine. I think that right now the Ukrainian people are facing a monster that they never imagined that they would face in such a way. Your family and friends are still there. You're in communication with them. What are they telling you from the ground? What are you hearing?
They're telling me how proud they are of the Ukrainian army. They're so thankful for the men and women who are fighting on the front lines. They're telling me they're encouraged to hear the support of the West, to hear stories like this and us seeing posts from us. They're telling me they're afraid. They don't know what's happening next. And at this point, 2 weeks into the war, well, really 8 years in 2 weeks, 8 years in Crimea for them and on the east,
Right.
But now 2 weeks of full-scale invasion, they are having to adapt. And I can't even imagine, but we're having conversations. We received a message this morning from a friend that's trying to leave, and they're driving with a convoy of 50 people from Kyiv to Western Ukraine. And what they're experiencing is armored vehicles, and what they're seeing is tanks, and what they're seeing is bodies. And just what that does to you psychologically, what that does to the children and who are growing up with this is going to affect them for the rest of their lives. And I've been talking to friends here in the States, and it's one thing to rebuild brick and mortar buildings. We can do that. That's happened before. But it's another thing to have the rest of your life, to have this mental wound and to have to recover from that. So people are learning the sounds of different weapons. They're regular people like you and I are learning when it's a Russian weapon and when it's a Ukrainian weapon. And you shouldn't have to do that. They want to go to work. They want to go to school. They want to have business. They want to travel. They want to have the freedom to do that. And that was not freedom that people experienced during the Soviet Union. I think that is freedom that God has designed for us. He wants us to be free and gives us avenues for that freedom. And so it's a right. It's a human right. And I think we all need to stand in defense of that.
I was just going to say that. I mean, it is a human right. It's the reason, when I say, the United States, and I say this a lot on our podcast, it's not just about the United States. It's not just about the Constitution, although thankfully we have the greatest nation on earth that espouses freedom. And I hope we continue to do that. I think a lot of us are very scared about the direction of where even our own country is going. But I think we can be grateful that we are still there. We have a solid base, in our Constitution. But when I think of the children and what you just said to me, and I've been in war zones and I've covered war zones in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I know what it's like. And I know what you're saying. It's generations of children that will be, and people that will be psychologically damaged from this war and living constantly on the offensive, and the defensive with, it's kind of you're constantly on guard, almost like PTSD, like post-traumatic,
Right.
Stress disorder. And it's breaking my heart when I see those photographs, and I saw that video, and I'm sure everyone that's listening to this has seen them, but of the, pregnant women in the maternity ward trying to get out, and the hospital, and the children crying, or the little boy walking all by himself, just crying, holding onto his little bag. I mean, it's gut-wrenching. It's gut-wrenching. And I believe it's going to get far worse. What is your family hearing about what could possibly end up taking place? Because I hear the Russian troops are surrounding Kyiv, and that is a big possibility that they could be moving in anytime now.
Yeah, so every single day that this goes on, they're getting more and more aggressive because they're getting more desperate. They wanted this to end very quickly, and I think they were hoping that the Western nations were maybe more divided. I think they were hoping that maybe we would just go on with our lives. Maybe we would not really care about what's happening in Eastern Europe, to this little former Soviet country. It's not that little. The longer this goes on, the more aggressive that Russian forces are getting, but also I think the more resilient the Ukrainian people are getting. They are not going to give up their country. And what I'm hearing from my friends and from my family members is, even if the Ukrainian government is somehow overtaken, even if Kyiv it goes down, if it's taken over, there's going to be ongoing battles because people are just not going to submit to a puppet government. They're not going to do that.
I was talking to my husband about this. He's in the military and, many years fighting in different parts of the world. And he was saying, there is nothing like a nation when an insurgency is on the rise, and when every single man and woman wants to fight that invading army. You do not want to be that invading army. It doesn't matter how much weapons you have or anything. When people are willing to fight you at every single corner, that's when you know. That's when you know
Yes.
There's going to be really no chance in the end. I mean, it could take 5 years, it could take 10 years, but it'll eventually flip. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want this to go on that long. We're praying for peace. We're advocating for peace. We're hoping that God miraculously ends this. Stuff like this has happened before. But if nothing changes, I think in the next several days or weeks, it'll be a long, drawn-out war. There will be more loss. There will be more death. And I'm not sure how many more people we want to see die before we take further steps. It was heartbreaking. You mentioned the airplane situation earlier. You don't know how excited the Ukrainian people were about getting those planes, and about the generosity of the Polish people who've opened their homes, who are giving their hearts over to the Ukrainian people.
Who are right there on the front lines, literally facing Russia. I mean, They are literally facing the bear, right?
Right. So there was this glimmer of hope. Man, we could have more help with our air forces, and then to have that taken away, that's heartbreaking. That's not helping their perspective or their fight. So I think we have to look for more opportunities like that to invest. If we're not going to send armed forces in, we got to support them as much as we can.
That was very disappointing. I mean, I think it was just such a surprise. I think everybody was expecting that these Polish planes, these warplanes would arrive in Ukraine. And I got to tell you, it's not the only time where I remember talking to people on the ground, even in Syria, during the uprising of the Arab Spring. And there would be, Syrian rebel fighters, people that were actually on the U.S. side, and who had been aided by other foreign intelligence agencies. And they would say, well, when are our supplies going to get here? Because we've been promised these supplies and we want to fight Assad, but we can't fight him without our supplies. And I would say, even on the radio, I would just say, I don't know. I mean, we keep hearing the same thing, but then they keep pulling back. Is there a fear in Ukraine that the United States is playing this kind of strange, that this administration is not taking a side, really? It's saying, of course, we're going to sanction Russia. We're going to do everything we need to do. But it's taking a lot of time to get to the sanctions that are actually going to bite. And it's taking a long time for them to get to the point where they're actually going to assist the Ukrainian people with anything, if at all.
Yeah. I'm seeing the same public support that you're seeing. President Zelensky has been grateful and publicly grateful to the American people and even to the American government. But And I'm not having as many conversations about that with my friends and relatives because they're concerned whether they're going to make it another day. They're not thinking so much about President Biden and the administration. They're
And
thinking,
whether they're going to get supplies. They're just trying to.
Will we make it another hour? Will we make it another day? And I can't imagine going to bed wondering, am I going to wake up with a Russian tank in front of my house? And watching some of the video clips of the urban warfare, that's just terrifying. It's terrifying. Going back to Syria, when that was going down, we were praying for Syria because there are human beings that were losing their lives. When Afghanistan was going down, we were praying for Afghanistan. We believe that prayer is powerful and effective, and advocating because we wanted to see freedom and flourishing. And we're doing the same thing right now, is praying and advocating and helping support and share the message.
What about for those people that feel like they're losing their faith? I mean, you're a pastor. You obviously you have a lot of faith in God. We're seeing like some of the worst of humanity. Whenever we see a war, whenever we see this type of horror take place, some of us lose our faith. Some people that are involved in it lose their children. What do you say to those people that are afraid that they're losing their faith in God?
So it's totally appropriate to ask questions. And I think the Bible invites us to do that. Historically, maybe various churches have not always been open to having these types of conversations. The Bible invites us to ask questions, but during times of struggle and suffering, I don't know that we lose our faith. I think we discover the type of faith that we have. And these moments really allow us to practice our faith, believing in something that we may not see or something that we may not feel in the moment, but trusting in the character of God and the history of God. And I'm thinking, it's so hard to believe this, but there's a story in the Bible in the Old Testament with a man named Joseph who was sold into slavery by his brothers. I think some people are familiar with that story. And at the end of his life, his brothers thought that he was going to get back at them. And there's this profound line that he has. And he said, what the enemy meant for evil, God can use for good. And so in moments like this, what I can do is I can pray for God to end this. And I have to believe that God can somehow use this for good, that God can somehow redeem this. And when I look at what's happening on the Polish border and the Romanian border and the Hungarian border, what I'm seeing is good. It's beautiful. It's human beings loving fellow human beings and empathizing with them. And the conversations that I'm having with people like you and various reporters, there's so much empathy, and it's beautiful and good. And it's quite a change from maybe an atmosphere the last 2 years of increasing division and anger and isolation. And so I do not want the Ukrainian people to suffer, but if blood is being spilled, then I'm praying that it's redeemed, that this is a moment that God will redeem in time and that he will use this for good. And that's my invitation and hope is whatever God is revealing about our faith in this moment. I think for some people, faith needs to be strengthened. Absolutely. But what I'm also hearing and seeing from Ukraine is maybe people that didn't have faith, they are experiencing the presence of God in ways that they maybe never thought they could before. They're experiencing his encouragement. When I watch these videos, I've had friends send me videos of people who are huddled together singing songs, who are praying together, who are reading stories together, who, it's pretty beautiful to see ordinary Ukrainians practicing faith in the midst of a war like this.
And I also think that it does teach us lessons. Like I've been watching it as well. And there were some videos even my young daughter saw where people were huddled with their children in the tunnels, and they were being interviewed, and you see a girl playing the guitar and people singing together. And I think that there is a sense of peace, there, like they know what they want. They understand what they're fighting for, and even when the fathers are out on the front lines, I think it teaches us a lesson, just like you said, right? It gives us faith and hope. How do you expect this to end? Is anyone talking about that? I mean, is anyone saying like how they're feeling, what they're worried about, what they're hearing on the ground? I always think it's important to get the messages directly from the people on the ground that are being directly affected. How do you think they'll expect this to end?
Man, that's a hard. I think it's an important question, but a hard question to answer. What we'd like to see, what the people in Ukraine would like to see, is for the Russian government to stop this offensive and to remove their forces. Period. And they would like to see the forces removed from all of their territory, for the boundaries of Ukraine to be honored that were agreed upon when the Soviet Union fell apart. When Ukraine surrendered their nuclear arsenal in order to be a peaceful nation.
That was an agreement. That was an agreement. Explain that so people understand, because we had an agreement with Ukraine, and Ukraine disarmed with the hope that if anything ever happened, that its allies not wasn't a NATO agreement. It was a different kind of agreement, but it allowed Ukrainian government to disarm with the intention that we would be there to support Ukraine if anything ever happened in the future, right?
Yeah, Ukraine had one of the largest nuclear arsenals of the Soviet Union, and they gave that up in order to have peaceful relationships with the nations around them.
Mm-hmm.
And the Russian Federation promised that peace, and others around them agreed to that peace. But we know that the regime in Russia is full of lies. And I want to be careful here, and I've tried to be careful along the way, and maybe not everybody will agree with me on this, but most Ukrainians don't have beef with an average Russian citizen. In fact, we have lots of relationships and family members. I have an aunt and a cousin. I had a cousin come visit me from Russia for last Thanksgiving, and he's a wonderful man who loves his family and who wants the same thing for his family and his nation that most Ukrainians want for their families and their nation, and what we want for our nation. But the Russian government is built on deception and lies. And I just heard a report that the foreign minister said that they did not invade Ukraine. He spoke in Turkey today and said that we did not invade Ukraine and we don't intend to invade any other country. That is such a lie. We are seeing the reports, and I'm not sure how they can get away with that in the 21st century, which is so shocking about the situation, which is why we didn't think he was going to invade the whole country. This is 21st century. Like, this is, everybody's seeing this, we're watching this. But the Soviet Union was built on lies. The Russian government operates in secrecy and in lies. And Ukrainian people don't want that.
Well, do you think the Russian people want that? I mean, I think
No.
I think there's a lot of Russians that are saying, we don't buy into this. This is not what we intend.
They do not want that. But when you're looking at 15 years of jail time for speaking out against your government, like, that will cause any of us to be afraid. And we're not talking about a comfortable jail where you're given 3 square meals a day and you watch cable television. These are like scary places. And I have watched some videos of Russian leaders who have spoken out and who are urging people to take that risk. Take that risk of 15 years, because your 15 years of captivity could be saving somebody's life. And so that's an interesting conversation that's very sacrificial. I don't think that the average Russian person wants to be, governed by a government that is veiled in lies. I think they also want freedom, but it's really hard to achieve that. I mean, we're talking generations and generations of oppression that's been cloaked in economic development. And so there's a double-edged sword there. They're beginning to experience the sanctions. They're losing that economic development and stability that they had. So I wonder if that will then change the way that the people as a whole operate. And collectively, they have strength. Collectively, the government should work for them. Collectively, the government should be democratically elected.
And I agree with you. But unfortunately, sometimes tyranny, like you said, it's like the idea of spending 15 years in a cold metal box, with no amenities and no family, especially, and alone, is something that's horrifying to most people, and I can't imagine that even the Russian soldiers, we think of people as numbers, and we think of them as like, those are the Russians, these are the Ukrainians, these are the Americans, these are the Taliban, but they're people, right? And so even when I think of those young Russian soldiers, charging into Ukraine, they're facing young Ukrainians who are like their brothers and sisters, right? They're looking
Right.
at the same face and they're saying, "My God, we are, we're killing people." So there's got to be some kind of awakening, I think,
Yeah, I don't know how much during a conflict like this, there's all kinds of propaganda and fake news, and we're trying to be really careful to pursue the truth. But I've heard reports of Russian soldiers giving up their weapons or disabling their tanks because they realize, hey, we're not on a training mission anymore. There's real people that are being killed, and I've watched a couple of tearful videos of Russian soldiers calling their homes or being taken care of. Um, Again, I don't know exactly what's going on over there, but
right?
the average Russian soldier does not want to be in Ukraine, and Ukrainians, they don't want to fight the Russians. They want to fight for freedom, and they're going to keep doing that.
Well, before I let you go, how can we help our Ukrainian brothers and sisters in this fight? What can we do as individuals here in the United States to continue to support them in their quest for freedom and democracy?
So, as a pastor, I'm going to keep imploring people to pray, seek God on their behalf, because the Bible says that prayer is powerful and effective. I want to invite you and encourage you to advocate for the Ukrainian people. Now, 2 weeks into this thing, it's easy for us to go back to normal life, to get tired of watching the news, to get tired of listening to this, but don't get tired yet. There are people who are dying, and they need us to be invested emotionally and to give some of our attention to this, and to keep this in front of our government, to keep this in front of other Western governments. So please advocate. The Ukrainian government is asking for specific things that they need. So pay attention to that as a nation. Let's pay attention to what they're asking for. I have a friend who works for the Medical Procurement of Ukraine, which is a national organization that's looking for medical supplies and medical technology for Ukrainian hospitals and to help support the military. And anytime there's opportunities to help provide medicine or be a part of work like that, let's do our best to do that. And then I think the refugees, millions now have crossed borders that have been safe and whose lives have been turned upside down. And there's ways for us to invest in organizations that are actively working on the ground right now. Our church is working and collaborating with other churches to send some people to help. We're looking to send some counselors. We're looking to send some individuals that speak Russian or Ukrainian to help with translation. So whenever there's opportunities to be involved in refugee work, that's one way for us to love the Ukrainian people and join the people of Eastern Europe, the free people, the democratic people of Eastern Europe who have taken on this massive burden of the refugee crisis there.
Well, I got to tell you, I want to do everything we can. We want to put it up on my website. We'll put it up on my Twitter feed, my Instagram. You send me, Pastor Moroz, anything that you think we can do to share the word and get it out there. And we're going to do that because we're going to do as much as we can here from home in order to help the Ukrainian people. Because I think one thing is certain. I think after all the years, and you're right, about our divisions, our nation has been struggling for years. I'm talking about the United States within as far as divisions, but I think something like this really can unify us, and we can all work together to get behind, fighting for freedom, fighting for the Ukrainian people, and doing something positive. I mean, I think it's time we wake up and do that and kind of leave all of that mess behind us, all that political mess, and realize that there people really are dying. I mean, my gosh, there is nothing worse, I don't think, than seeing your child suffering or your family members. Yeah. And when I see those children, just like I saw in Afghanistan, when I see these children just abandoned or alone because their families have died or because they have no one to turn to, it's gut wrenching. And, I don't want to see children without fathers or mothers. And so many people are making sacrifices. Guys, we can do just a little bit more. We can do anything we can to help. That's why I'm going to put your website up on my website. I'm going to put links. I'm going to do whatever I can to help you.
Sara, thank you so much. Let's cherish the democracy that God's given to us here. There is no perfect democracy on earth. That's why we need the kingdom of God and the values of Jesus from the Sermon on the Mount to be embedded in our lives and our hearts. But let's cherish the democracy that God's given to us. I think that's one of the things that this thing is teaching us is the reason why people come to the United States like me is because there's something beautiful happening here. And it's not always easy and it's not always fun, but it's something that we have to defend. And one way for us to defend our democracy is by standing with others who are defending theirs as well. And I know Ukrainians are resilient people. They are courageous people. They're hospitable people. I really believe that on the other side of this, the world's going to experience a free Ukraine and be able to enjoy some of that culture and hospitality. I can't wait to bring some of my friends back over there. And maybe you and I can go over and meet some of my relatives. And
I would love that, Pastor. That's a deal. And I may even take you up on covering the refugee crisis in Poland or going to one of those safer nation states, not inside Ukraine, but I would love to go with your church and cover what you guys are doing out there. So that's something I'm definitely going to talk to you about.
Thank you so much, Sara. Thank you. And thank you to your listeners.
I have to agree with Pastor Moroz. It's all about prayer, guys. It's all about prayer. I mean, that's the one thing. If we can't do anything else, let's just pray, not only for the people of Ukraine, but for the whole world, because we are really on the edge of something really horrific here, and God only knows where this will lead. Before I get to the close of the show, I want to tell you a little bit about America's Gold Expert and the 2021 Numismatic Dealer of the Year, Dr. Mike Fulgens. He is the head of Universal Coin and Bullion, and he's offering you a new 2022 genuine 1-ounce Silver Eagle coin at just $28 with free shipping directly to you. If buying American-made products is important to you, these pure silver coins, backed by the United States Mint, will hit the mark. Silver is up over 400% in the past 30 years, and guess what? With inflation the way it is, it's poised to go even higher. Silver and gold have traditionally been viewed as hedges against inflation, basically serving as life insurance for your investment portfolio. Everyone should own a percentage of precious metals. So call 1-800-UCB-GOLD. That's 1-800-UCB-GOLD, Universal Coin and Bullion. Be sure to mention me by name when you call. That's 1-800-UCB-GOLD to get a tangible asset you can hold in your hand. Call Universal Coin and Bullion at 1-800-UCB-GOLD, and their expert team of representatives will help you order your $28 American Silver Eagle coin today. That's 1-800-UCB-GOLD. Don't forget to tell them that Sara sent you. Let's go back to Texas Congressman Chip Roy, who we talked about at the top of the show regarding our terrible, terrible policy at the U.S.-Mexico border that the Democrats actually want. During that same speech where he said more money for the border won't solve bad policy, which I totally agree with him with, he also hammered both parties for cranking up spending in just about every area with virtually no debate. They did it late at night. We didn't even have a chance to understand what's going on in this bill. Listen to this.
We're not going to get a secure border, and we're not going to get more oil and gas being produced in America. And then we're going to say, great, let's have a vote and send more lethal aid to Ukraine. And we're not even going to have a debate down here about what we're doing in funding Ukraine with Putin rolling over Ukraine. All we're doing is backroom deal making, waiting for somebody to drop a bill on the floor of the House and then come down and vote yes or no. That is a disgusting display by both sides of this body. We ought to have a full and open debate on the floor of the House about what we're doing in sending arms to Ukraine, how much we're spending, what it means for our involvement, what it means for NATO, what it means for stopping Putin, and stop spending money we don't have. Stop funding tyranny. Stop forcing Americans to get a jab or lose their job. Stop leaving the border wide open, and stop selling the American people a bill of goods. And I'm looking directly at my party when I say that.
Congressman Chip Roy is so right on this. He is so right in every way. We can't keep increasing spending. We just don't have it. It's killing the American people. It's killing us, especially on inflation. And we're now more than $30 trillion in debt, guys. It seems like it doesn't even mean anything anymore. I mean, you could tell me 60 trillion in debt. What does that mean? How are we going to pay that back? Who do we owe it to? Think about that. If Republicans win in the midterms, they must begin to get their spending under control. That's why we need Republicans in office that are disruptors, Republicans that aren't going to play the same old rhino games that they play all the time, worried more about themselves than they are about our country. We need people who are going to care about their constituents, who are going to care about our nation, and who are going to do the right thing. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. You better start doing your job. You better start doing it right, because the American people are getting sick and tired of it, and we will hold you accountable. Thank you again for joining the Sara Carter Show. I'm so grateful to be with you on this show. I was so grateful to have Pastor Moroz on the show. And, look, anything we can do to help people fight for freedom all over the world, we should do it. But that begins at home, and our country is at stake right now. We have a lot at stake here, folks. We need to stand up. We need to look at what's happening in our own nation, and we need to continue to fight for freedom here so that freedom can exist everywhere else. Again, thank you for being a part of the Sara Carter Show. God bless you, and God bless our world. Today, I'm joined by Rebecca Weber, the CEO of the Association for Mature American Citizens. It's also known as AMAC. The most important question, I think, for so many people out there is, how much does AMAC membership cost? What does it cost the regular consumer?
Yeah, so for $16 a year, okay, or less, you can join at a 1, 3, or 5-year membership. You get a couple of things. You get the benefits. You get a great subscription to a magazine. So for $16, you're going to receive a bi-monthly magazine. But your voice is now going to be heard in Washington. We take our marching orders from you. If you stand for faith, family, freedom, if you believe in the Constitution, if you believe in the greatness of America, if you believe in individual freedoms and everything you just said, Sara, $16 is not a lot of money to join the 2.3 million members that are really fighting hard to ensure that America remains the best country in the world.
Rebecca, thanks so much for being with me today. I'm honored to have you and AMAC as a sponsor for the Sara Carter Show. For more information, folks, visit amac.us/Carter.